It's like the participant number is leveling off a bit, so why don't we go ahead and get started? So, hello everyone. Welcome to Ask the Grant Writing Experts. I'm Dr. Meg Bouvier. You know me as the creator of your library of NIH grantsmanship courses. I have over 35 years of experience at NIH as an applicant, an intramural researcher, a staff writer, and now as a full-time NIH grant mentor. I've helped clients land over $500 million in federal funding, and I'm here to answer your NIH grant writing questions. So grab a cup of coffee and let's get started. So just a reminder of your attending live, you're in listen only mode, so you can type your questions into the Q&A box. You can go ahead and start typing them at any time. You can also, if you have something to add to the conversation that we're having, feel free to type that in the chat box for the whole group to see. And if you are watching this as a recording, and more people are doing that, including on our open YouTube channel, just a reminder that today is October 16th, 2024, and things change pretty quickly at NIH. So whatever we talk about today is true to the best of my knowledge as of today. But you should always double check the NIH website. And of course, nothing that we talk about here, none of the information that we share in this forum is meant to replace a conversation with your program officer at NIH. What you should be viewing in the library now, if you're working on a resubmission, maybe you're looking at master resubmissions, which is a course that I updated, I think it was in August, so that is recently updated. But I suspect that many of you are actually beginning your preparation steps for the February and March deadlines, which is why we're talking about the new scoring criteria, because I know that people are kind of anxious to kind of wrap their heads around what this change is going to be. If that's the case, I suggest that you watch Master the R Series Chapter 1 preparation if you're working on an R Series application for Cycle 1 2025. That would be deadlines in February or March of 2025. Any NIH updates? Well, as I mentioned, there are new scoring criteria coming our way. Forms I, the new form set, will be released for use with applications on or after January 25th, 2025. It includes scoring criteria changes, some of which we're going to be discussing in a moment. It also includes changes to other things as well. For example, if you're applying for an institutional training grant, such as a T32, there are changes to some of the tables. And there are also changes coming our way to the biosketch format. A client of mine who is a reviewer let me know that NIH reviewers are being advised to even for applications that are being reviewed right now. So that would be for the Cycle 3 2024 applications. They're being advised to keep the new scoring criteria in mind in the sense that they want reviewers to be thinking of the should it be done, can it be done, will it be done rubric, which we'll talk about in a moment. Keep in mind that the new scoring criteria, NIH has been really clear in their webinars and materials that they have released about this, that the new scoring criteria are not really meant to change the way you write your application. They're meant to change the way reviewers score them, which I have some thoughts about, but we'll talk about that in a minute. And apparently the biosketch format is going to be required in May, but I think they're soft launching it for applications on or after January 25th. So at some point, I'm going to work in a tutorial about that as well. I've been really focused on the change to the scoring criteria because that's coming first. So I've definitely been more focused on that and answering questions about that as well. Okay, so without further ado, why don't we go ahead and talk about the change to scoring criteria, and then I will start to answer questions. I see that people are beginning to type questions in there. Feel free to keep going. Go ahead and put your answers in there. Okay, so I'm gonna, let me just pull up the scoring criteria and then do a screen share. Okay, so you guys should be seeing this 5-year regulatory criteria reorganized into 3 factors. So this is probably not new to any of you. And in fact, last week we did a bit of a deeper dive into factor 1 Today we're going to talk about factors 2 and 3. So just a quick overview reminder that under the old system that we've been using for many, many years now, in the R series, this isn't true for the K series, but in the R series, there have been 5 scored criteria: significance, investigators, innovation, approach, and environment. This is being reconfigured into 3 factors. Factor 1 is importance of the research. So this is the should it be done piece, right? So significance and innovation are going to be kind of mushed together into a single numeric score. And for those of you who missed last week, the recording of that should be up now. I know it's on our YouTube channel, so it's almost certainly up in your course dashboard as well. Today, let's talk about factors 2 and 3. So factor 2, rigor and feasibility, is what we had been calling approach under the old system. That's still a scored criteria. And factor 3 is where investigators and environment wound up. It is not a scored criteria. So let's do a little bit of a deeper dive into that. Let's start with factor 2. Okay. I'm going to share part of a blog post that my team and I are working on. And I don't want to, I wish I could make it so this table would be visible on a single screen, but I don't want to make this any smaller because I suspect it won't be readable. So I'm not going to exhaustively read the scoring criteria for the under the old system. We're going to really focus on the new one. So this is rigor and feasibility. So factor 2, it's still going to be a numeric score from 1 to 9, 1 being the best. And this is the, if factor 1 it was the should it be done, factor 2 is the can it be done. So this is rigor and feasibility. So the first part of it is simply evaluate the scientific quality of the proposed work, evaluate the likelihood that compelling reproducible findings will result, rigor, and assess whether the proposed studies can be done well and within the time frame proposed, feasibility. Okay, no surprises there. I mean, that's kind of more or less in the old scoring criteria as well. But what I really want you to notice is look at all these rigor bullets. Holy cow. Lots and lots and lots of rigor. And it continues beyond our screen here. So this is not a huge surprise. So just to give you a little historical context, the 4 rigor scoring criteria, they didn't exist prior to 2016. NIH published them in 2016. And historically, they were, the first one was called scientific premise, which morphed a couple of years later into rigor of prior research. And of course, we all know that to reside in the significance section. And then there were 2 in the approach section, and they're still called this: scientific rigor and consideration of relevant biological variables, which can be addressed somewhat also in the human subjects form. And then the 4th one is a separate document, not part of the research strategy, called authentication of key chemical and biological resources, which is a 1-page form. If anybody wants a deeper dive into these 4 rigor scoring criteria, including examples, I have a whole course on that, and the vast majority of you on this call have free access to all the courses. So feel free to check that out. That has lots of samples. So what I've noticed since 2016 is that more and more mechanisms and NOFOs have incorporated rigor language. So you've seen rigor pop up as separate 3-page sections, for example, on some center grant and multi-project U awards, sometimes topic-specific mechanisms, not the parent R01, but like RFAs, topic-specific type mechanisms, will have additional language about rigor, and wanting to see more language about rigor. Training grants have had more and more language about how you're going to teach your trainees about rigor. So you see a lot of that on T32s and that kind of thing. And here we are going into 2025 with the new scoring criteria in the R series, with lots and lots and lots of rigor language. So this trend is only increasing. So, and even though NIH has said that their intent is not to have applicants write the application differently, that it's really about the reviewers scoring the applications differently. I would argue that anybody who's writing a grant application, in my opinion, not only do you read the instructions, but you should look very carefully at the scoring criteria. And my personal practice is to have the scoring criteria up on a separate screen. I have a lot of monitors, so I always have the scoring criteria up on a separate screen while I'm working on an application, no matter what the application is, so that as I'm thinking about how to structure my subheaders, for example, in a grant application, I'm matching my subheaders to whatever the scoring criteria are, so that as I'm writing, I'm looking at the sheet that the reviewers are going to be looking at when they score the grant application. And I do this whether it's a center grant or a multi-project U or an R or a K or anything. I always have the scoring sheet up in front of me. So I would argue that we all should be looking carefully at these lengthy, and I mean, the old instructions were lengthy too, but you can see that now there's quite a lengthy bulleted list just of rigor, and that we should be thinking about how to structure our subheaders in the approach section accordingly. I mean, we're still going to call it approach. Um, Although you might want to break out a separate rigor section or a separate feasibility section and create bolded subheaders with some of this information. And then there's a separate feasibility section here as well. So, um, so I would encourage you to take a look at this. I'm going to drop the that's a side by side from a blog post that I'm working on, but you can also find I'm going to drop a URL in the chat. You can also find this detailed information in the NIH in this NIH website that I'm dropping in the chat. Hold on, I'm dropping it to everybody. There you go. Okay, so check out that URL, which has that detailed information. And then we're going to take a quick look at factor 3. So let me just share that screen as well, and then we'll get to the questions because there's a lot of questions coming in. Okay, so factor 3, these were scored criteria previously, investigators and environment. And keep in mind that statistically, these are the two scores that tended to be the best of the 5 scored criteria in the R series. Statistically, the worst score is typically the approach. Now these are not going to receive a numeric score from 1 to 9. They're going to be deemed as satisfactory or not satisfactory. And if an assigned reviewer deems it not satisfactory, then they will be requested to provide a written information about what about it is not satisfactory. So the goal here is that CSR is trying to reduce bias. This is a response to applicants complaining that many grants are in the hands of few researchers, and to be able to spread the wealth. NIH has made all kinds of efforts to try to address that critique. Some institutes actually cap the number of R01s that any given investigator is allowed to be a PI on. This is a pretty robust response to that critique from the Center of Scientific Review. So, okay, so let me stop my screen share there and take a look at some of the questions. Okay, wow, we have a lot of them. Okay, the first question is, I'm preparing to submit my first R01 in February 2025 and having difficulty finding a program officer to chat about my research. Also, if I find one, what exactly do I need to ask them to create a connection with them? So, so this is a question asked by Esther. So, the reason that you're attending this live is because you have access to my courses, and the answer to your questions can be found in Master the R Series Chapter 1 preparation. So there are many, many ways that you can find a program officer. I kind of walk you through the various ways to find one. I talk at length about why you want to find one and the kinds of questions you would ask. I even provide a template of an email to send a program officer and a list of possible questions to discuss with them. So again, that's Master the R Series Chapter 1 preparation. If you're registered for the boot camp, so boot camp, Master the R Series boot camp begins tomorrow. I guess I should have said that too, as far as what's new. You can tell I'm still like working on resubmission applications, so I'm a little frazzled. Our Master the R Series boot camp begins tomorrow. So that's October 17th, Thursday, 2 p.m. Eastern. Tomorrow we'll be talking about Chapter 1 preparation. We'll be going in depth into all of that information. So typically these sessions, my presentation goes about an hour-ish, maybe a little longer, and then there are questions depending on the size of the group. And I think we have a couple of hundred registered. I'll either take questions throughout or hold them at the end of each lesson. So, Esther, I would encourage you to either check out Master the R Series Chapter 1 preparation and or go to the boot camp tomorrow, because it's your question is way beyond the scope of what I can answer in 2 minutes on an HE, but it's laid out in like just nauseating detail in that course. Okay, what's more important for NIH funding, priority score or percentile? Percentile is more important. And the reason for that is that, in fact, I will even say that I am often surprised when a client shows me a set of summary statements and their percentile score doesn't seem to match their actual numeric score. Sometimes their percentile score is like much better or much worse. Is that you're ranked against your cohort in a given study section. So, all right, I'm getting a message that my internet is unstable, and I don't know why, because it's not stormy here, but hopefully this information is not being interrupted. But you're ranked against a cohort in your study section. So if you just by luck of the draw happen to be in a cohort where there were really strong applicants, even if you wrote a really good application and scored really well on it, your percentile score might be worse than you anticipate, or the converse could be true, where the reviewers seem to have a lot of issues with the application and the numeric score wasn't that good, but your percentile score is actually pretty good because you're ranked against a cohort that, for whatever reason, happened to be kind of weak at that time. So the percentile score is the one that's really going to matter more in terms of, and in fact, when institutes issue funding lines, they tend, at least in the R series, they tend to issue them in terms of percentiles and not numbers. This isn't true. Not all mechanisms offer percentile scores, but it is true for the R01. So, okay, let's see. When the biosketch and other support change, will you provide a tape tutorial? Yes. Yeah. So that I have to do a deep dive into, I'm sure we're gonna do a blog post and a mini tutorial on Ask the Grant Writing Expert as well, for sure. Honestly, I wasn't thinking I was going to need to do that until like February or March, but this week, one of my clients who's a reviewer said, "Oh no, they're going to soft launch it, and it'll be required in May, but people can start using that format for the Forms I for February for applications on after January 25th." So I'm kind of thinking like, holy cow, I got to go back and rejig my schedule and figure out how to work in a mini tutorial and a blog before January 25th. So I have to go in there and see what I can juggle and figure out where to fit it in before then, because I think I need to do it sooner. But yes, for sure, we'll be talking about that. Okay, why are we seeing more emphasis on rigor, do you think? The revised scoring criteria could have put a greater emphasis on novelty and innovation, for example, but they didn't. Yeah, so that's a really good question. So NIH has been all about rigor since 2016. And there back then, I mean, this is going back a ways, right? Because it's like 8 years and further. There were a lot of blog posts coming out from the director of CSR at the time, who was his last name was Nakashima, from the director of NIH. My old boss, Francis Collins, wrote some blog posts about it. And the director of extramural research, who was Sally Rocky at the time. So these were three people who were issuing a lot of written materials in 2013, 14 through 16. And it was because of concerns of lack of rigor, and not just a lack of people explaining the rigor of the project well, but there being an actual lack of rigor in the way NIH grantees were conducting their science. So I think that's the driving force behind this. Um, Novelty and innovation, we actually discussed at the last session, and I can't remember, Janet, if you were there, but there's actually a decided de-emphasis on novelty and innovation in the factor one scoring criteria. Um, as evidenced by the fact that innovation is no longer a separate score, it's combined with significance, and that's a single score. And the very first bullet under the new innovation scoring criteria within factor one is that as an applicant, you're meant to tell the reviewers if innovation is an important if innovation in the concept. I'm actually going to pull it up because I have it right here, because I think this was actually one of the things that I liked best. Evaluate the extent to which innovation influences the importance of undertaking the proposed research. And it goes on from there, under the same theme. And I was actually really delighted with the de-emphasis of innovation, which I explained 2 weeks ago, because not all projects, if you're designing a project and the best way to test the hypothesis is to use methodology that is tried and true, as opposed to something sexy and new and innovative, like you risked being marked poorly in the innovation section, even though you were making the most scientifically sound decision in the way you were structuring your project. And that was a problem that really created a problem for a lot of applicants. And I think the new scoring criteria has really addressed that head on. So I'm, for one, very happy that the emphasis is now on rigor, and innovation is actually de-emphasized. Although it's still, if there is innovation in the project and it's appropriate to discuss it, there's plenty of room for that, in the innovation factor one score. It's just that you are I think, less likely to be marked poorly in innovation if it's appropriate for you to use a tried and true technique. You've mentioned writing to include signposts that reviewers will be looking for with their score sheet in hand. Where can we find those scoring sheets if we haven't been on a study section but want to write with them in mind? So NIH issues these, and I include URLs to them in the courses. So if you're, like, let's say you're watching Master the R Series Chapter 4, there's in the course supplements in the very first lesson, you can download the e-workbook, which has the slides on which you can take notes, which I suggest people do before the boot camp, by the way, because you could take notes on my boot camp slides basically while I'm presenting it. But there's also a course supplement that includes all the URLs that I present in the course, and scoring links to scoring sheets are there. I have not seen the links to the scoring sheets for the new scoring criteria yet. However, they're going to look like what we just looked at. So I'll just share that again. This is now the NIH URL that I just dropped in the chat, but it's going to look something like this, something like what you're going to see in the parent R01 NOFO. This is what's going to be there. And the scoring sheet is going to look similar to what's here. So for example, you might create a header under significance that says importance of the proposed research, rationale for the study. Those are going to be, those are pretty similar to what we have now, but as you dig down into the approach, some of these headers are going to be a little different. I'm not suggesting that you need a separate header for each and every one of these bullets. Be sensible about how you structure your write-up. Some of these topics are similar enough that they can be grouped into a single section. But when you're thinking about what kind of subheaders to create, I would definitely read through these and, use them to guide your decisions about what kind of subheaders to create. Oops. Okay, let's see. Let me stop my share. When the review comments include a clinical expert would be helpful. And what is your recommendation to address this, especially if there was a clinician as senior personnel included already? Oh, okay. So that's a two-parter. So typically, when reviewers say a clinical expert would be helpful, you often see that kind of a comment when somebody's doing a basic science project and reviewers have concerns that the project is not eventually going to be useful within a clinical setting. And typically, the way you make that comment go away is to bring on a clinician in an advisory role, somewhere between 2 and 5% effort. They participate in meetings once or twice a year, and they kind of give the project their blessing and say, "Yep, I know you're a basic scientist, but you are definitely targeting." A real clinical problem. And if I extrapolate the curve, I can see the results of this project being helpful to me as a clinician working with the target population. You're saying that there was a clinician as senior personnel included already. So in your case, what you want to do is on the introduction, the one-page introduction to the revised application, I'm assuming you're writing an A1, you want to emphasize that, include that as a critique and say, one of our senior personnel is a clinician and is providing that kind of guidance to the project to make sure there's we're targeting an appropriate eventual clinical application for the project. They may have just missed it. I mean, a lot of things, I can't tell you how many times I've had applicants come to me with summary statements and say things like, but I am doing that, but we are doing that. It's usually a formatting fix because somehow the skimming reviewer missed the information. You can highlight it in two ways. One, you need to address it in the introduction to the revised application, but you could also emphasize it, for example, in a team table. Somehow they missed it in the team table that person was a clinician providing that kind of input. So it's not even a writing fix, it's usually a formatting fix. And a tired skimming reviewer somehow missed the information. Okay, let's see. Do you think submitting in February, that is the first to use this new scoring algorithm, a hindrance or a benefit? Will reviewers likely be more strict or more lenient? That's such a good question. So I think it's a little bit of a wild card. I wouldn't let that be the driving decision about whether to submit. I personally, I really like it when there are changes to scoring criteria and formats and things like that, because I think if you're a diligent, thoughtful grant applicant, you can sometimes actually use that to your advantage because there are tired, busy applicants who are not thinking very deeply about whatever the change is. So if you're thinking deeply about it and really trying to be diligent to address whatever it is, it can actually work in your favor. But having said that, I wouldn't let that be the rate limiting step to submitting in February or June. I think you should do what is most scientifically appropriate. If you feel like February is the right time for you to submit scientifically because of the amount of preliminary data you have, the number of publications, your ESI status, things like that, your tenure decision, whatever the reasons are, working backward off your ESI expiration to make sure that you can get in the right number of R01 applicants beforehand. I let the science drive the decision. I wouldn't worry too much about it. I do think that, certainly reviewers are receiving training in the new scoring criteria, so they're going to be looking at it carefully. But I don't know that they're going to, like you're ranked against your cohort, so you're all being scored with reviewers who have the same mindset. So even if they're more strict in the scoring, they're going to be more strict across the board, and then you're ranked against your cohort. So I don't think it's going to be a hindrance to apply in February. Is boot camp recorded? I cannot make it tomorrow. Indeed, it is. So you have two ways to watch the material. One is just to watch the pre-recorded version, which is Master the R Series Chapter 1. The advantage of watching a recording of tomorrow's actual session is that, tomorrow we're going to talk about preparation, but the advantage of watching a recording of the fall boot camp, especially upcoming sessions is that I'm going to be talking about the new scoring criteria. So it usually takes a couple of days. My team is incredibly quick about getting the recordings up. We usually tell people within the week, but my team seems to get it up, the recordings up on your dashboard within a couple of days. And then those bootcamp recordings stay on your dashboard until we do the next round of bootcamps, which will be in February, for the June, July deadlines. All of that was already included on the submitted grant, including a detailed letter from the expert for the A1 score remained the same and comment was also the same. Oh, this is the person who was talking about the clinician expert, I think. Yeah, you know, I hear you. Not all reviewers read every bit of your grant application, and it can be maddening when you feel like I said all of this in the appropriate places. How in the world did you miss it? If you're putting it in as an A1, you just have to address it in the A1 respectfully and just say, we do have a clinician as a senior key personnel, and that person is providing that kind of guidance on the project. Just like a simple 1 or 2 line thing, you know, without, you have to kind of not have any attitude creep into it. But yeah, I hear you. Sometimes they just miss it, like this is what I mean when I say reviewers skim, they skim. So, in fact, most of your voting reviewers only ever skim. Hopefully your assigned reviewers have read your application ahead of time and written out diligent comments. I know we're over, and I have one more question. Any tips on a resubmission for when a reviewer thought the second and third aims were too incremental? Well, I guess you could do a couple of things here. You could downgrade it to something smaller like an RO3, or you could maybe combine aims 2 and 3 and then write a juicier aim 3, so that there's something a little more juicy and exciting and interesting for aim 3. It's funny because I would say it's much more common for an R01 applicant to be criticized because their project is too ambitious. Particularly among junior faculty, that's a really common problem. But here they're saying it's too incremental. So this sounds like you're under proposing, and you may want to combine aims 2 and 3 into a single aim 2 with maybe like 2A, 2B, and then write a whole new aim 3, as long as you can fit it in the time frame in the budget. It could be an exploratory aim 3 that is supposed to be hypothesis generating. And that would, we're not looking for a publication or statistically significant results, but you're looking to generate data and look for trends in the data to help generate hypotheses for the follow-up R01. So that's one way to handle that, is to because I'm reluctant to tell you to just propose something completely new in aim 3 because it may be beyond the budget and the time allowed for an R01. But you could do an exploratory aim 3 that's hypothesis generating, and that typically is not going to be something that's going to massively drive up the budget and the time, or do a small format R and leave it as is. So. Okay, and we're over time. So thank you all. As always, you guys ask fantastic questions. We're getting more and more people coming to this. And I hope to see a whole bunch of you tomorrow, October 17th, 2 p.m. Eastern, for the kickoff of our Master the R Series Bootcamp. K applicants are very welcome to attend this as well because it helps them write the research strategy. Just note that the new scoring criteria do not apply to K submissions. You're still just being scored as a single research strategy score. So the new scoring criteria, no change for K applicants. So I will see a bunch of you tomorrow, and good luck with your grant writing, and have a great day, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.